Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I am Vince.
Today, Vince, we're going to talk about the idea of realism in fiction, particularly in cinema, and we're going to try to define realism as we once, in another podcast months ago, we made the attempt at defining what dark entertainment was. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to talk about realistic entertainment, and we're going to talk about what we think people mean when they say realistic. I think this is something we've maybe touched on before. We may have actually done an episode on it long ago. I don't remember, but chances are we'll say some stuff here we haven't said before, and I don't even think people can, right at this very moment, go back and listen to that one. So
go back, find it, tell us wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it's available, but anyway, so yeah, we're going to try to define realistic. We're going to talk about what people mean, and we're going to talk about whether or not people really would want most of their entertainment to actually be realistic, meaning the way the world actually works. Mm-hmm. So Vince, let's start with let's start with realistic versus non-realistic heroes. Okay.
Well, I think that to a certain extent, we have to just cut fantasy elements when we talk about realism. And, we try to make... I think there's this movement with darkness that started in the 80s that people thought that it becomes more realistic if people are more horrible human beings. I mean, if you look at something that Frank Miller does, he's trying to move this world from what we had in this... circa the 1960s, comic books were very... comic books in cinema weren't necessarily dark, even though we did have some dark things. We had this very Ozzie and Harriet world that everything existed in. People were nice. People were... the people that were
Leave
bad...
it to Beaver.
Yeah. The people who were bad were very limited, and they were foreign to our world.
So you're suggesting that when people like Frank Miller and Alan Moore came around, that we had maybe an overcompensation?
Yeah, that's what I think happened. So what they're essentially doing is taking that foreign threat of that foreign evil and moving it into our world. We are our own threat. And so therefore it becomes more realistic, because the idea is that we have the good and the bad that exist, that coexist. I think that's the word I'm trying to use.
Sure.
So therefore we have this realism that comes out of that. However, I do believe...
If you show both sides, it is more realistic.
Exactly. However, I do believe that there is an overcompensation where we, like, for example, Batman and Robin. Or All-Star Batman and Robin.
Right.
Where we have characters who are just strictly despicable people. And everybody's evil, even the good guys.
Which is made well after we're used to people doing more rough and tumble. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the problem with All-Star Batman and Robin, is that, and I don't dislike it as much as you do, but
I hate it with a passion.
Yeah, and I don't. So there you go. But I think the problem is that it just in some ways kind of came too late. I think it's one of those things where it's sort of like, well, let's make these characters as unlikable as possible and see if that's interesting. It's almost as if Frank Miller is telling us we need to look at every possible spectrum of characters, whether it makes them likable or not. I'm not sure I agree with that. Where it's like, well, we've never seen a Batman that's just this obnoxious. Let's do that. And
Which I'm not against, actually.
And I'm like, why? I'm not sure what exactly the merit is in doing that. So, I don't love the idea that just because something has not been done, we must do it. I think we need better reasons to do things than that. And so it seems a little bit too sensational to me.
I think it's okay to make Batman this horrible human being, as long as Robin is an interesting, realistic character.
Okay, sure, yeah, but you need somebody.
Mm-hmm. We need somebody to latch onto, but Robin seems to sympathize with him for no reason.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that Robin is the sole protagonist of that book, but if I could be convinced of that, and if he was more likable...
He should be, though.
Maybe not likable, yeah, and he should be. Maybe likable is not the right word, I threw that around a lot, but I just mean like he's the protagonist that we're following, he's the person that we're supposed to care about. I'm not convinced that Frank Miller meant for Batman to be more of a background character in that.
Yeah. Well, I think that some people have ideas that aren't necessarily the way that they originally intended it to be, or aren't delivered, or should be delivered in a different way than they originally intended it to be.
Yeah, well, and of course that book kept coming out late, so I mean he didn't sit down and write it all at once, obviously.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Which can mess with things. Let's go back a little bit and look a little bit at like characters in movies, and just let's try to define realistic, because what a lot of of filmmakers seem to do is they try to coax us into thinking something is realistic that's not.
Yeah.
Right? And so real-world physics apply, except that they sneak in things that are not real-world physics so that their characters can survive in insane odds.
Yeah.
You know? So we take somebody like Rambo, you know, and we throw him in a barrage of gunfire, and he always comes out unscathed.
Yeah. He doesn't... You know, I have a friend of
the
mine.
man doesn't have superpowers.
Yeah, he can't fly.
He
doesn't have heat
He
vision
doesn't
or
have
anything.
super strength, but he's got giant muscles, so he's stronger than you or I. But he doesn't have super anything. But if you really look at it and you really pay attention and say, okay, wait a minute, he's actually doing some things that real people can't do. He does have superpowers, but no one, including anyone in the universe, is aware of this.
Yeah, and him or that character himself has no idea.
You or I, whether we were trained as well as Rambo or not, could not possibly go into the same situation that he does and make it out alive every single time.
Yeah, and that's where marketing comes in, because the character is sellable, so he gets to survive.
That's right. So what do we mean when we say that something is realistic or that it should be realistic? Because I would submit to you that I don't think that most people would say that that's necessarily a problem. Depending on what it is, I think people want to believe that something is realistic inside of a universe.
Yeah, I think that's how good cinema, good comics, good anything gets created. Is that people try to make something believable within the context of the universe. For example,
Suspension of disbelief.
Exactly. For example, say Batman Begins. I kept thinking the word Dark Knight on words Dark Knight.
You're on kind of a Batman kick today.
Yeah. But Batman Begins, one of the things that Nolan always tries to do, or at least people tell me that Nolan tries to do, because I've never heard him say it from himself, so I have no idea. But people say he's trying to make the realistic Batman movie. Everything that happens in that movie could happen in real life, therefore...
And he has more or less come out and said that, or at least that he's trying to make a Batman that's more believable in real life.
Mm-hmm. So we can't have characters like Clayface existing in that universe. However, we have a machine that can evaporate all of the water in the city, but for some reason does not affect the water in the human body.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before. That's a great example, though. And the thing is, it's a highly more... I'm not sure how to put this. It feels more realistic, but it isn't actually like the real world. It's still stylized, but it's done tonally. It feels more realistic, and that's what we do. It's like an optical illusion, right? It's almost a mental illusion. We're made to believe that this is more realistic than, say, something like Batman Forever, even though things still happen that couldn't possibly happen, because the piece takes itself more seriously, and because we're more engaged with the characters. And I really believe that if the realism comes from the character interactions and comes from internal conflicts and things like that, if that's where the reality comes from, where we see these people as real three-dimensional characters, that's where believability comes in. And we can dismiss a lot of the physically impossible stuff because, after all, we have to tell our story. Mm-hmm.
So, a character... Sometimes we can accept that a character makes it out of a situation alive. I mean, for example, we can understand that Batman has all these ways, that he's rich, he's powerful, he's smart, he has help with Lucius Fox and Alfred. And
he's got years and years of training in various things.
So we can accept that this guy has the potential of making it out of a situation, and
we're made to believe that more there than we ever have been in anything else in Batman. We say this guy can do these things, and we believe it because we were shown some of it.
And I think part of the reason is that he's never really shown as that supreme bad buttocks guy who just goes in there facing a billion bullets and then makes it out alive. He's shown as a guy who walks into a situation knowing exactly how he wants this thing to go down and knowing exactly what he needs to do in order to make this situation go down the way that he wants it to go down.
That's true. Yeah, he's so calculating, and still, you have that scene where he shows up in the it's not a warehouse, but the first scene where we see him in the bat suit, and he confronts Falcone's men, and he's in the shadows there and everything, but then you still have the that nearly traditional Batman has to fight off all the minions scene, even though the fighting is made to look more realistic in the sense that we don't even get to see all of it. And people have complained about that, where we do the close-ups where we barely see what's happening, to give and I always actually liked that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, other people hate it, but the reason they're like, how come we can't see the choreography? I'm like, well, real fights aren't choreographed, and so and even Dark Knight, where they show you more of it, it still doesn't look choreographed. It's like Batman is beating these guys down, and it's not pretty. Fighting is not pretty, and so they show it to us in an ugly fashion because that's what fighting is like. Now, at the same time, he's taking out 10, 15 guys, and why do we believe it? Well, we believe it because Ra's al Ghul had a line earlier on in the film where he said, you know how to you've learned how to take out a dozen guys. We'll teach you how to fight 100 or 500 or whatever it is he says.
Engage an army or something.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, he says a number and I don't remember what it is, but you see my point. We're made to believe this because we've been told that he can do these things, and we also see enough of it that we believe it. So the film is working very hard to give us the illusion that these things are actually possible. Now, are they? I don't know.
I think
but I don't think it's important if it really is, because the movie makes us buy it, and that's good storytelling.
I think it's good storytelling. I think it's good filmmaking, even, because I think those scenes or those shots where we're not really capable of seeing what's going on is because to the average human mind, do we really know what it would take for one man to engage 100 assailants?
Sure.
So therefore, we have these vague shots that show us that he's done something. It seems brutal, and yet we don't know exactly what it is. Well, that's because we can't really fathom what it would take because none of us are the super soldier.
Yeah, and it's made more believable because we don't actually see it happen, it just does.
Yeah, so, for example, I'm going to assume in this upcoming Captain America, we see amazing feats we see him flying through the air, essentially. Something has launched this guy in the air. He's doing stuff that the average man cannot do. With Batman, he has a suit, and he has ropes, and he has pulleys, and he has all these things that allows him to do the things that he does. However,
whereas Captain America has a superpower.
So we have those things. We have movies where people will charge in face first to bullets. And we have movies where people make it to where they won't get hit by those bullets. And I think that's part of where our sense of realism comes through. And I had a conversation with a friend about Cowboy Bebop at one point, and he said one of the reasons he likes Cowboy Bebop is that the hero is destructible. He says, these people get shot, they get hurt, they get to the edge of death, and somebody pulls them out of it. And, I'm paraphrasing, he didn't actually say that. But he said that's one of the reasons he liked it, is because these characters can be hurt. And I found that fascinating. I've been thinking about that for a number of years.
Yeah, what's very interesting about that, of course, is that it still isn't, true to life, because if a real person was put in a situation similar to that over and over and over again, eventually you'd have the moment where he didn't get pulled out.
Yeah.
And because we're telling a story about heroes that we want to see each week or each film or whatever it is, unless we've decided that we're finished telling the story, they can't be killed.
And that's why I think Cowboy Bebop is such an interesting series. I do think there's a cap on the series. I mean, it ends, and I think they have a good cohesive beginning and ending point for the series.
Sure.
So we can allow these characters to eventually finish their tales.
Mm-hmm. So. And I mean, let me ask you this: when we're talking about like wanting escapist fiction, because we don't always want, or at least I don't always want to see movies that reflect real life too much, because I've gone to the cinema to escape my real life, to enjoy 2 or 3 hours of somebody else's life for a while, so that I can get told. I mean, even some things that are really dark and tragic and that kind of thing, if they're so highly stylized that I feel like I'm no longer in my real life, I still can be fully engaged by that kind of material. And that's the reason that there's some films that you don't like that I like. That's the reason I like things like Sin City and Watchmen, because they're so ultra stylized that I'm just like, this is not reality, but I'm also sucked into that reality. So let me ask you this question. we see a lot more things these days that have, like, unhappy endings. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? You know what I mean? That's more realistic, air quotes. I suppose
that's okay. I think
it's unrealistic if we do it too often, because sometimes good things do happen to people. You know what I mean? Sometimes we forget that because. I'm sorry. Let me say this real fast because don't we also get the sense sometimes that maybe this is going to sound maybe subversive to say that maybe gasp sometimes fewer bad things happen than we think they do, just because the news doesn't tell us about the good things. You know what I mean? When we watch the news, like if you watch the news, you'd think 9 out of 10 children get kidnapped at some point or another, right? And if you look at the actual statistics, the likelihood of your child getting kidnapped is very low. But we hear about it so often that we think that we live in this world where there's 100 bazillion child killers and child molesters out there. Now look, it's a bad thing. It happens, but we shouldn't. We also don't want to get too paranoid because our popular culture and our popular media tell us that all these horrible things are happening. Yes, they're happening, and we should be careful. But we also, I think, sometimes think that certain things happen more often than they actually physically can.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the idea that the story's in the conflict. So therefore, bad things do happen, and that's what people want to hear about because that's where the conflict. I mean, if we had the Even Couple starring Bill Pullman and Jeff, whoever that guy is, as I'm referencing Family Guy at the moment, but if we just had no conflict, our stories wouldn't go anywhere interesting.
Well, right. That's why you have status quo and then you break status quo. Because status quo is what happened before the story begins, and then the story begins when something interrupts that status quo. Your traditional stranger story. You lived in what was the town you grew up in? Iowa. You lived in Iowa for 17 years, and then you finally moved to Lawrence, and that's where your story begins because you're new there. And so you meet people you haven't met before, and conflict can come from that meeting, or conflict can come from your first job there, or your first day at school, or yada yada yada. Yeah.
I remember when I met yada yada yada.
So we have to break status quo, and that's what begins the story.
Exactly. And as for good endings positive and negative endings, I don't know if we really want to call them good and bad.
Sure.
But for an ending where good things happen, I think that's necessary. An ending for bad things happen, I think that's necessary too. I don't mean in the same feature. I mean, I think when we have an overabundance of one, we forget that the other happens, or we forget that people would like to see the other happen on screen. And
I think variety is important.
Yeah. Because then we get movies where we get studios trying to tell people, oh, this needs to have a happy ending.
Yeah,
well, why does it?
Right.
That's hardly realistic, and the rest of this feature's realistic, so why should they get together and hold hands at the end?
That's just like a studio saying, we had a picture about pets last year that was really popular, so this year we need 6 dog movies. We're gonna make 6 different kinds of Air Bud this year because that's what's popular right now, or whatever.
Or maybe they should get a dog to write 6 movies. Problem solved.
But yeah, I think it's as ludicrous as that, where you say dark is in right now, edgy is in right now, or the flip side of that is gumdrops and rainbows are in right now. That's all we can make.
Rainbows, lollipops, and
that's all we can make right now. That's all anybody cares about.
Yeah,
these trends we see happen in comics all the time. We see them happen in movies all the time.
I think that
television all the time. We can we're only going to make reality shows because A, they're cheaper, but B, that's all anybody cares to see. Well, how long is that going to be the case, and how are you going to know what else people might like to see if you only make one thing?
Mm-hmm. I think that violence plays into realism to some extent. The idea of cartoon violence, the idea of
absolutely
of stylized violence, the idea of realistic violence, and. Like, for example, I think there are movies that try to play at being realistic that aren't really realistic by any means. And one of those movies, and we touched on that earlier, but one of those movies I'm going to cite right now is the original Death Wish, which I heard that they've been trying for years to make a remake to that, and I hope that whatever happens, happens. So, I don't really care. But with that movie, we have a guy who was trained in the art of using a gun when he was a kid. He grows up to be a bleeding heart liberal. His wife and daughter are raped and killed, and then he starts hunting down criminals just as a way of getting vengeance on people that didn't actually hurt him. he's just trying to reduce the criminal population. So I think that they're trying to portray it as realistic as possible because, of course, there's not huge shootouts that happen in this. But here's a guy with a gun that walks out and just tries to get into trouble, and he manages to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And, you really think you're going to walk into a subway and you're going to survive if you're looking for trouble. You really think you're going to walk into the bad part of town looking for trouble and survive. That's the thing, is that, sure, he was trained as a kid using a gun, but that's coincidence. Any man who picks up a gun and walks into a situation probably is going to get hurt.
What makes that extremely complicated is that in real life, extraordinary things do happen.
That's true.
And that's very interesting. Did you ever see Catch Me If You Can?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I just watched that last week for the first time, and I mentioned it actually on Late Night this week. But anyway, the thing that I found extraordinary about Catch Me If You Can is that if it didn't say based on a true story, I'd be like, this is an excellent film, but this stuff is impossible. This could never happen.
True.
And this guy did most of this stuff, And the thing is, you have to assume that a lot of the things that happen, and again, it's Hollywood, you don't know how much is true and how much is not, but they put up things at the end of the film and at the beginning that they claim are fact, and those things are extraordinary. And, apparently this guy really did impersonate an airline pilot and, a doctor and a lawyer. It's amazing, if the guy actually did all these things. And so you have to assume that in order for that to be possible, a lot of the coincidences that happen in the film probably happened to this guy.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying? So coincidences do happen. People do get lucky. People get lucky all the time. I can count a number of times that I can't believe how lucky I got with something.
There's a lot of people that say reality is stranger than fiction.
Right.
So, it makes sense to me that a person would put something in a movie and expect us to believe it. However,
because it actually happened.
But just because it actually happened doesn't mean it's believable, and doesn't mean your audience is going to buy it just because it said true.
Did you hear that in writing classes you were in? I heard that all the time.
It just occurred to me that I'm quoting, I think, Professor Moriarty. I think
you probably are. Moriarty said it. Lim said it. Even Lim said it in playwriting, I think. And I know DeNoyer said it over and over again. That's the reason that you don't just, when you're writing a story, we're going to get a little off topic, but that's the reason when you're writing a story that writing teachers will often tell you not to just write down, whatever actually happened if you're basing something on something that really happened. They say, it's a great idea to base things off of real things because you're an authority on things that actually happened to you or things that you were witness to. So, you use those things. But the reason they're fictionalized is because you have to extrapolate and embellish and change things to make it a believable story, because sometimes if you just say it the way it actually happened, it actually seems less believable than if you embellish and change things.
That reminds me. I read a story at one point that a person had written for a fiction writing class that I was in. That basically it was a love story between two people who met on the internet. They get together, they get married, and during their wedding, some guy breaks in and shoots them. And everybody in the class, including myself at the time, we all said, "There's no lead up to this. It just happened. This isn't really part of the story." And I think to go back there and rethink what I said. It's not so much that that's not part of the story. It's that they missed where the story actually is.
Exactly.
So, you want to tell a story about two people that got married and then got killed on their wedding day. Well, what led up to that guy breaking in? Is he actually related to them in some way? Well, here's the question.
So you're saying it was his story and we should have followed that guy?
Yeah, maybe it was this guy who the story was really about. Maybe we wanted to know more about him. Think about that. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So I just had an idea based on that girl's story. I might write that anyway.
No, that's really smart. You're totally right about that. And there's obviously there's a whole lot of tricks like that go into writing. But yeah, you have to know where the story actually is.
So it's not so much that two people who get married and have this horrible thing happen on their wedding day isn't realistic. It's not that. It's that people tend not to focus on the actual story. And like, for example, as much of a cluster hoo-ha as Rise of Silver Surfer was, they started the movie showing the Silver Surfer coming. So it's not like he just showed up out of nowhere. We knew that this creature was on its way, and we were watching characters effectively get prepared for this creature to be coming.
Right. And then we went to characters who didn't know he was arriving yet, and then they were surprised, but we got to see them surprised after we already knew what was happening.
Yeah, I didn't say what I meant to say.
No. You were right.
You think I'm right.
No. You're right. We did see characters, but they weren't our characters preparing yet. We saw other people at NASA or whatever. But anyway.
What I was trying to say is that we saw characters we saw characters that were unprepared, and we saw just how unprepared they were. They were like leading us toward the eventual situation. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Am I going somewhere with this?
I want to close off on this by saying that I think that by its very nature, filmmaking can never be 100% real.
Yeah,
not possible. And I'm not even talking just fiction, even documentary, even anything that you might film that you're claiming is real. It's not possible.
There is
with I don't know, maybe exception of like a music concert or something, just because people are used to cameras. I don't know, but maybe not. But I'm just saying that like if someone knows they're being filmed, they're going to act differently.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And even if someone doesn't know they're being filmed, the person doing the filming has decided, how the shot's going to be set up and how they're going to present it to you. It's never going to be 100% real because people have different perspectives.
Every piece of truth that a person says, or every piece of supposed truth that a person says, is entirely subject to their perceived experience. So. You had a negative experience, Bill had a positive experience. You guys are going to disagree on what happened at that particular junction in life.
That's absolutely right. And of course, memory is a really funny thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't always remember things the way they actually happen. Our mind fills in the blanks, especially as far away as we get from an event very often.
I mean, this is a little bit of a strange thing to bring up, but look at Respect for the Dead. I mean, if you knew a guy who was just a horrible human being in life after he dies, you're probably not going to say anything bad about him in retrospect. Because of this idea of respect for the dead.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're getting off the ball here, but look at the difference in how people will look at a movie star or a really popular person just before they die and just after they die. The late '90s, early 2000s, Michael Jackson was the butt of jokes constantly, butt of jokes. He's not now. He died. Now everyone has immense respect for him. I'm not saying people didn't have respect for him before necessarily, but it was in vogue to make fun of him. Yeah. It's not now. I would imagine the same sort of thing probably happened when Elvis died, and then after a few years it wore off and people started making fun of Elvis again. It'll be interesting to see if the same thing happens with Michael Jackson.
I don't think it can't. I think it's going to happen. Especially with the history.
But I'm just saying that, like, what reality is, and of course we've seen many people say this, and many fictional things make this point within their narratives, that reality, just like beauty, is within the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
And at the risk of using a cliche, it is. And so true realism in film, in my opinion, comes only from a filmmaker making you believe something.
Yeah.
So in the moment that you're there, you believe it, and it is real.
Mm-hmm.
And when you leave and when you dissect it, perhaps it no longer is. But for that moment that you were there and you were made to believe it, that is realism.
Mm-hmm.
Within the context of a piece. Is it reality like we experience reality? No. But that's subjective.
There is an established reality within a piece.
Exactly, yeah.
Patton Oswalt said something that I think is funny. Comedian Pat Oswalt. So, of course, it's going to be funny. But one of the things he said was at some point reality is going to be filmed entirely, and they're going to have to start writing reality. And and then after they've started writing reality, and every day you get up and you have to live out the events of a summer blockbuster. And after a while, all the movies will become what used to happen. It'll be like Man Has Melba Toast for breakfast, and then all the indie guys will come in and look at these epic Melba Toast movies and say this isn't reality. Where's all the ninja vampires?
That's really funny. Now I also want to say that that's not to say that there aren't a lot of movies that we enjoy that we don't completely, get suspension of disbelief in. I don't want to oversimplify this. I still find it hokey every time I watch a 007 film, and Bond drives into again a barrage of gunfire, and like the glass on his car doesn't even break. You know what I mean? Nothing happens to him. Are we really within this universe made to believe that this works with this guy? I don't necessarily think so. Lots of other people get shot. Like, why not Bond? Like, how is he just so charismatic that bad things don't happen to him? It seems like that's his superpower. I'm so charismatic, nothing bad happens to me. And yet it's charming, and we can enjoy things that aren't necessary. So I'm not saying that we have to have realism, but I'm just saying that I think that the only thing that there is that we can call real is when we're made to believe that it is. That, and when something just reminds us so much of real life that we then also are made to believe that it's real. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
No, that makes sense.
Again, I'm trying to avoid oversimplifying this.
Bond has special charm powers, and Paul Kersey from Death Wish has special gun powers.
See, those two people would not want to meet each other in a back alley.
No, which one wins? Charm or guns?
See, I don't know, man. I think they're in a stalemate every time.
Yeah. See, in the established reality, it's a questionable thing. In actual reality, I'm pretty sure guns are going to win.
Well, Vince, real quick, let's go ahead and go to our rant. And in fact, today we're going to do a co-rant. We're going to rant together on one topic.
A rant?
Yeah. Yes. No, it's like it's hyphenated. It's a co-rant.
As opposed to a Durant, which is a villain in Darkman.
In Darkman, right. Yeah, that didn't feel especially realistic.
No. Not at all.
I still enjoyed things about it. Okay, so Vince, what are we going to rant about?
We're going to rant about infestation. IDW is infestation. No, we're going to rant about infestations in general. You should probably try to get your bug infestation taken care of.
We've been sponsored this week by some bug people.
Your date does not believe that the roaches are your pets. Get them taken care of.
I couldn't think of the word exterminator for the life. I was like, bug people, and I'm like, that's an entirely different thing, bug people.
There's a Dark Horse book called Exterminators that I'm interested to see what it's about.
Anyway, so Infestation is this thing that IDW is doing. It's this big crossover event.
Or at least it was billed as a big crossover event.
Yeah, we can certainly argue about whether or not it really is actually a crossover event, but they're certainly treating it like a Marvel or DC type crossover event. They're acting like, oh, those sell, we better do one. Mm-hmm. And it's extremely gimmicky, and it's a lot more gimmicky than it has to, because I think mine and Vince and I are both really frustrated by this, because it could have been really good, and there's also things about it immediately that we're already liking.
Yeah, you see, here's the deal. It could have been this amazing crossover event that had Star Trek, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Ghostbusters all crossing over with each other.
And when we first got, teaser material about it, that's totally what it looked like it was going to be.
Yeah.
It just said infestation, and then it showed us these, and it was acting like, the dimensions are shattered, or it really played it up like that. And you remember the first teaser posters? They had these zigzaggy lines between each one, Transformers and Ghostbusters.
They had partition space on the cover for every one of the titles that they were going to use.
And so you got this sense that it was just going to be this big event where they all exist in the same universe, kind of like Marvel versus DC, Amalgam or something.
Mm-hmm. And except for having a preview in the back of Infestation 1, none of those characters appear in Infestation. However, they have their individual titles for Infestation. Now, here's what I would have liked them to do with Infestation. Mm-hmm. I think it would have been a good series, or a good big crossover event, had they had all those characters just have this big, massive crossover where all those characters appear in the same book, and we could have the novelty of having everybody there. We could have the novelty of having the crossover event, and we could have some tongue-in-cheek humor about making fun of Marvel and DC for making events such a big part of their lives.
Because, they're going even as far as to having the checklists and everything. It's exactly the same kind of thing.
You buy one book, you flip it over, they got a checklist on the back. And
the only difference is that we're not actually seeing all these characters in the same book together like we would in DC and Marvel. And that's the unfortunate part, because I think that's what got people excited about it.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer really excited about it. And you read Infestation 1. I mean, it's just a bunch of...
Yeah.
Well, I didn't read it. You told me about it. But, like, isn't it just a bunch of, characters that are kind of generic that we don't know? And...
Well, the characters come out of another book that I didn't read. I don't know who they are.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And in this instance, they're not written particularly well because Infestation 1 is a horrible contrivance that's trying to make some sort of link between all the different characters that they're using, or all the different titles they're using. Mm-hmm. So essentially what it is it has what looks like a Stargate. That's which, if they had the licensing for Stargate, that would have been awesome.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they've got Star Trek. I don't know why they couldn't have just used, like, the Guardian of Forever or something.
Well, I suppose what it is that I wonder if there's maybe some copyright problems, but if they have the licensing, why wouldn't they be able to cross them over?
They've been able to use a lot... Oh, you mean... What do you mean?
Like, maybe there's a copyright problem that they can't cross the characters into each other's books.
Some kind of a clause or something? In that case, they shouldn't have even done it.
Yeah. But I doubt there are, because there are G.I. Joe Transformers comic books.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Even if that were the case, the idea that we talked about this earlier, before we recorded, and then the idea you had still would have been a much better thing for them to do, which is honestly what I thought they were going to do in the first place when I found out that they weren't all crossing over, which is make it zombies in every... do a little series for each one that's all zombies, but they have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, you see, that would have been fantastic. I mean, we could have had...
You just buy the ones you like. Yeah. You don't have to worry about the rest of them.
And maybe you buy them even just because they say Infestation on the title, just because you're interested to see zombies in every title, because it's an event without being an event.
See, I like events like that. That's totally cool with me. I was totally okay when Marvel did the Marvel Age. Mm-hmm. Or no, I'm sorry, the Heroic Age.
Yeah.
Where that wasn't really a crossover event. It was just this banner that went over some things, and I found out that each title that had that over, I was kind of enjoying. So I'm kind of cool with things like that. I don't know why they didn't do that with IDW.
See, now we have this horrible contrivance that has to be inserted in every book. I mean, stuff that happened in Infestation 1 is already one of the characters from Infestation 1 is already peeking into Transformers Infestation 1, and. Transformers Infestation 1, by the by, not very good.
Yeah, but you said Star Trek was quite good.
Star Trek was not bad. It was highly enjoyable. And I'm not going to say it's good. I don't know where it's going to go, because, of course, it's just a 2-issue shot.
Well, and they all are. That's the other thing I really hate, is that Infestation is just 2 issues. This isn't like other crossover events, like Infinite Crisis or Civil War, where you could read the main book and not read the other things attached to it, because the main book will be 8 or 12 issues or something, and there'll be other things that jump off of it that give you more information, but usually those you can pretty much read them straight through and get the gist, right? Not so with this, because you only get 2 issues of the main book, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you have 2 issues for each of the other ones.
See, the main book is just a contrivance to try to shoot zombies into these other universes. And it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
I mean, we could buy zombies just showing up anywhere.
Any of these continuities. With maybe the exception of Transformers, but even still, sure, why not?
Yeah. I mean, Transformers, we have living robots. I mean, why wouldn't we accept the living dead?
There's no reason whatsoever, though, that we need that kind of a contrivance for Ghostbusters, of all things.
Yeah.
That's already a horror thing. Or at least within a universe with horrific type things that happen.
That's a hard word to say.
Yeah. Star Trek is a universe where we... have aliens and things, and you can always use that to make stuff like that happen.
And all you have to do is... episode?
No, there was an Enterprise episode where they did that. It wasn't very good, but we've already seen it in Trek before. All you got to do with the original series is do it like they did with a lot of other things, just make it a disease. They go to some planet, there's a disease, and like you were saying to me earlier, which was a really good point. If you can have a Nazi planet and a Roman planet and all these other planets, why not? Why not one where some zombies have taken over and we go down to investigate?
This will never happen, but I would love to see it happen.
Yeah.
Star Trek versus aliens.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Sorry, I just had to say that.
Well, I don't know why... well, I guess there'd be contract issues, but yeah, it'd be
Dark
pretty cool
versus IDW.
if IDW and Dark Horse could do things like that. Because honestly, every time Batman and Superman crossed into those, they were nearly always good. I don't know if you've read any of that, but Batman, Predator, 1, 2, and 3, every one of them is really good.
Superman Aliens is pretty good.
I heard Superman Aliens is great.
I heard that Superman, Batman versus Aliens and Predator was not particularly good.
I didn't read it.
But I heard that from a big Aliens and Predator fan, and then I heard from two people who weren't big Aliens and Predator fans that it was good, so take that as you will.
Well, we're all out of time, but thanks a lot for listening to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
And we'll see you once again next week.